to our LinkedIn Live today. I'm really excited for today's session where we have cybersecurity experts breaking down our cyber bracketology. And what does that mean? Everyone's going to talk about the top 4 cybersecurity strategies that they've really selected in building a layered cyber defense program and why. What's exciting here is there's no wrong answer, but there's lots of thoughts, lots of opinions on what really matters in building the greatest cyber defense for you. So by ways of introductions, I want to thank my guests today. We have David Chou, who's the CIO and Digital Healthcare Executive. Welcome, David.
Thanks for having me.
We have Dr. AK. She's a cybersecurity coach and co-founder of CyBlack. I got to be part of a formerly Twitter chat with you, and it was very exciting and a number of views. So we're excited to have you, Dr. AK.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone.
And then last but not least is Scott Schober. He's a cybersecurity expert and CEO of BBS, and very excited to have Scott. We've seen some of your videos talking about cyber bracketology, so excited to hear your thoughts today.
Yeah, great to be here with you guys. Thanks so much for having me.
And then Stacy Leidwinger, I'm the Vice President of Marketing here at Secureworks and the team that really created cyber bracketology. And we're in our 2nd year talking about these strategies. So let's go ahead and get started. David, I'm going to really start with you. It's great. We can see your final 4 picks up there, but why don't you walk through us briefly on why did you pick these 4 strategies as being your top in building a layered defense program?
Yeah, thank you, Stacy. So my thought mechanism for picking my top 4 is really from the enterprise point of view, from a decision maker's lens. So advanced threat detectors, incident response plan, full service IR team, and having a deep cybersecurity expertise. These are all gaps that we face in the enterprise with talent shortages and even having advanced insights into what's happening. So I'm operating under the lens from an organization that operates, let's say, between 700 million and above in terms of gross revenue. And these are the challenges that I typically face on a regular basis throughout various organizations that I have worked at. It's always, how do we get the right responses? How do we find the right talent? And how do we have a full service team that's sitting behind the internal team to do stuff? So with that being said, that was how I really came down to these top 4 as sort of the priorities from a executive leader's perspective that has to operate enterprises.
And what I love, David, about your picks is you really thought about the problems that everyone faces. So talking about those that maybe don't have the expertise in-house, they don't have a large enough team, and these are the areas that they're probably going to partner with. I really like the fact that you pulled out the advanced threat detection. I see that a lot, especially as organizations start to implement cloud, looking at identities. How do you make sure that you've got that advanced detection, especially when threat actors know how to move, what I like to say is through the cracks of those siloed systems? Also, the full service incident response team. I don't know if that could be more critical. I also like that you have the incident response plan. I've had some lively debates that if you don't have that in there, what are you thinking? Because you absolutely need to have that plan. Scott, I've seen some of your conversations out there talking about cybersecurity. Any thoughts around that full service IR team? I see a lot of debate, especially with cyber insurance, right? If I have cyber insurance, do I need to have access to a full team? Where do I invest in? How do I pick the right team? Curious in your thoughts on David's picks that do have a center around incident response.
Well, I think the team is really critical there. Having a full team to handle it, that's going to be essential. And a full team of experts, if you don't have that, it's going to fall out. There's a lot of facets, I think, that are important. But when you have that full team, it'll make a huge difference. And even tying in certainly with AI and some of the other things, I think when you couple that, that's very powerful.
Couldn't agree more. Dr. AK, do you want to walk us through your 4 picks? I'm sure you don't want to necessarily argue with David, but very interesting that yours are completely different from David's thought process. So we'd love to hear how you came to your top 4.
Okay, thank you for this. One of the things at the back of my mind when I was selecting my top 4 is the sophisticated threat landscape. So I had in mind that we are in an era where the threats that we are seeing is changing the landscape in itself is changing. For example, what was obtainable like 10 years ago, 8 years ago, is not what is obtainable today. So using that as a mindset, I knew that I had to start thinking in the line of AI, for example. I also had to start thinking in the line of proactive threat hunting and proactive response actions, which is critical. And when we are looking at the vendor experience, talking about sophisticated threat landscape, I have to start thinking about emerging technologies. And what came to mind in that instance is future-proof. I mean, a vendor that can offer the service that would be in line with sophisticated threat landscape, which is what I considered when I was doing my top 4 picks.
No, I love that, Dr. AK. And one of the things I really like that you're emphasizing is with cybersecurity, you always have to be learning. You always have to be changing and adapting to new trends. And you built your Final 4 with that in mind. And I think that's amazing. I love the proactive threat hunting. I really think that for all the sophistication that somebody has, for all the systems, you still want to make sure that you are proactively checking and looking for those things that maybe don't yet have the advanced detectors. Maybe it's new telemetry you're pulling in. Maybe there's a new vulnerability that's been identified and, frankly, systems haven't caught up maybe yet to catch some of those things. I also like the AI-assisted analysis, and I think we're just on the verge of what does AI really mean in cybersecurity? I know here at Secureworks, we're seeing a lot of it really help us reduce the workload on those security analysts and make them more productive because we're able to go ahead and expedite investigations. But David, I'd love your thoughts when it comes to AI-assisted analysis. What are you seeing with some of your customers and also, just other peers that you're working with and how they're using AI?
I think it's still operating in a black box when it comes to AI-assisted analysis, where we're trusting the algorithms that's provided by the vendor landscape in terms of threat detection. It is a great thing because it saves a lot of time, whereas before, probably a lot of human interaction needs to happen to do these analysis. So I would say from that standpoint of having an out-of-box AI proactive analysis, it works wonders where it saves manpower. Probably still early because with anything with AI, it takes time to really refine these algorithms more and more to be able to get them right. Plus, in addition to the changing landscape of cybersecurity, those algorithms have to be tweaked constantly. So I would say we're still in the early stages, but we have seen the positive impact of just not having as much manual interaction from the staff so that they could focus on other things. And that's where it comes in handy. But I would say because advanced AI always needs time, we're probably at the early stages.
No, I think that's very true, David. It's one of those things that I think we're learning. We're learning about the power. I think we're just on the verge of untapping what it can do. But I also think it always comes with a, let's check it. Let's make sure it's doing what we expect it to do. All right, Scott, now let's go to your Final 4, a little overlap, but some different views. And so how do you come to your top 4?
Yeah, let me, maybe I'll share a brief blurb on each one, and I'll start, not necessarily in any particular order, but threat detectors. I think as a CEO of a wireless security company, I've overseen all kinds of threat detectors in the past 2 decades that I've run the company. And I know how to implement which ones work on paper compared to maybe the real world, which ones are truly cost effective. So that might be my strongest player there, threat detectors. Penetration testing, I think that's really important. We hear a lot of information about it, and thinking about it again from the standpoint of March Madness and all that's going on. Coaching a winning team involves more humility than maybe you might think, because you have to discover and face your weaknesses in order to defend against other teams' offensive strengths. Pen testing is the perfect security posture for this because you're fortifying your security by predicting the other team's next move. It's like a real-time strategy playbook that keeps evolving each game. Threat-informed response. Maybe of all my bracketology picks, this might be the most defensive one because it's also the most introspective. What threats matter the most to my team or my company, and how effective have my security policies and tactics been up to this point? Threat-informed response requires a little bit deeper look into security in order to not just instill the right defenses, but also question and analyze the nature of what we're trying to defend. And then finally, deep cyber security expertise. This is really my second cyber bracketology, and I can honestly say that I learned a lot since the first, just from writing books, developing products. We all learn from others. And I think even speaking on the subject, that really helps learning from my colleagues, learning what mistakes they've made and mistakes I made. So cybersecurity expertise is really a never-ending discipline because there's always going to be bad hackers out there. But I'm confident that by continually growing my abilities, it will keep me one step, hopefully, ahead of them.
I think it's great, Scott. And I do like how you picked threat-informed and deep cybersecurity expertise because they really play into one another. And it's something that I know I've talked to a lot of organizations about when they don't necessarily have that expertise in-house. How do they go and partner so that they understand the threat landscape and what is the biggest risk to them? And I think that's one of the things that makes cyber bracketology fun to discuss like this, because it really depends on every organization has a different risk profile. Every organization has different, perception of what threats are critical to their business, what data they're protecting, where the data resides, how mature they are, and that's going to depend on what they select. And so I also like that you picked more on that proactive front of the penetration testing, right? And I'm guessing you picked it not just to do the checkbox of penetration testing. We know all organizations will check it, but you talked about the humility and really making sure that you're going through these strong adversarial exercises that really thinks about where are the potential weak spots that someone could come in. Dr. AK, what are your thoughts around penetration testing? I know you say you do a lot of coaching around cybersecurity and working with organizations. I'm sure this is a topic that comes up quite a bit in your world.
Yes, penetration testing is an important aspect when you're looking at proactive readiness in cybersecurity. Why is it important? Because a cybersecurity professional is coming in and simulating what an attacker would do on a normal day. So it means that you have to come into the organization to say that, look, these are your weak points. These are the systems that we need to work on to ensure that we get to that point where we talk about security readiness. I believe that every organization that deals with protection of information from the technology standpoint should always think about and consider penetration testing as one of the key ways to ensure proactive readiness in an organization because of what it does in terms of preventing a possible cyber attack that could happen if this is not done.
I couldn't agree more on that. And I know I don't have my final four picked on here, didn't want to influence anyone per se, but it's interesting. I have quite a bit of overlap and one that's unique. So I have the advanced threat detectors, proactive response actions. I agree with you, AK, on you can't be enough in terms of how do you really think about that future and how do you automate as much as possible. I have the deep cybersecurity expertise. I don't think that's something that you can operate without. The one that was different was vulnerability detection. And the reason I ultimately picked that, and it's interesting, this one's been a little debated on LinkedIn of, well, everyone does that. The reality is it's still one of the top ways we see threat actors get in. They are going in and exposing vulnerabilities that exist within a software stack. And so I think there's an element of there of not only understanding the vulnerabilities, but pulling in that threat-informed research, the deep expertise, and how do you really prioritize the right vulnerabilities to lower your risk. So that was my one differential pick. So going to wrap up this discussion, I've thoroughly enjoyed it, but I'm going to leave with one question to each of you. And Scott, I'm going to start with you since we went last on your top four. If you think about these layered approaches and what you've put in your final four, what is the one that you're like, oh, I wish they really made it into the top four? Or was there one not on the bracket that you really expected to see in terms of a cyber defense strategy or tactic?
Wow. It's a tricky one. I mean, one thing that I think about just from a standpoint, I really enjoyed going through the entire exercise in a sense, I should say, because when I first saw it, it seems a little overwhelming. But then when I hone in, it actually helped me do some analysis within my own organization. And what do I mean by that? I think it's the visualization of it. It's a nice discipline to see maybe where you had strengths and weaknesses. And one that I kept going back to was a couple of years ago, we had penetration testing done. And as a cybersecurity company, I was probably a little overconfident or cocky. I said, "Oh, they're not going to find anything here. We've got this covered." And the next day I met with them and sat down, and they started detailing all the vulnerabilities and things. And I said, geez, we've got our work to do. We've got to patch up a couple different areas here. So I think just going through this process, it visually opens up my eyes to see we don't all have it covered. Probably all of us as an organization, we need to dig in a little bit. So it's good to go through these exercises and find other areas. And there's probably beyond these four, there's a lot of them on there that I say, ooh, we got to go back and analyze this a little bit more and learn where our weaknesses are so we can really strengthen and reinforce them. So I love going through this process. I think it's important. And even though we think we got it as leaders in this industry, that could be a mistake. We're never strong enough because the adversaries, the bad actors, keep changing their game. So we need to stay on our game and find out what areas we got to touch up on and improve. So just appreciate being part of this wonderful discussion here. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. And I really appreciate that. Yes, it's a fun activity. It has a nice framework to it, but these are the real life discussions that customers are having in organizations every day in terms of where do I put my next dollars? I've had this debate around, well, you can't pick only four, you need to be doing it all. The reality is, yes, if you really want to make sure that you've hit a maturity level, you're going to hit all of these aspects. But in any given day, you have limited resources, limited time. So where are you going to put the most energy? And it should be always evolving. AI-assisted analysis was not on the bracket last year. So this is one that sneaked in.
Yeah.
So with that, Dr. AK, any final thoughts from you and anything that you wish got sneaked into the top four, or anything you thought was missing on the bracket that you expect to see maybe next year come out?
Okay, let me start by agreeing with Scott. I totally agree with him. One thing I like to tell people is that there's no 100% security. If we put everything in the cyber bracketology in place in an organization, there's still going to be like a potential breach that could happen. So security can never get to that point that it is 100%. I really appreciate this cyber bracketology because it actually opened my eyes to several areas in terms of for future consideration. I feel like when I did my top four, I should have taken a step back, especially around proactive readiness. And I also mentioned this on the X space that we had. I feel like I should have gone with personalized security reviews instead of proactive threat hunting. And there is my reason. My reason for personalized security reviews is that when you look at a security review, it encompasses a lot of things. I can easily say that if I do a security review for an organization, I would most likely cover things around incident response, vulnerability management, penetration testing, threat hunting, and so on. A thorough security review is going to cover all of that. So I feel like for when you're talking about proactive readiness, doing a security review would open your eyes to every other aspect in security. So that would, all other aspects would come under that. So that would have probably been my preferred pick if I had taken a step back and, digested it properly. But I mean, still going with proactive threat hunting is still fine. But I mean, if I'm going to do this again, I will definitely be picking personalized security reviews. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. AK. And one of the things I really enjoy about your, kind of next fifth option is basically how you internalize the definition and said, I can get more with a personalized proactive security review because it should incorporate penetration testing, proactive response, and incident response if it's being personalized for me. So I love the fact that you looked at a pick that you think I can get more from this one tactic. All right, David, same question to you. Do you have a fifth runner that, you have a little bit of wish it made it, or anything that wasn't on the bracket that you were surprised not to see in this year?
Probably a thing to think about would be something I'll classify as cyber liability. So we all can agree that third-party risk is probably such a big ordeal. Many organizations are struggling because the majority of them have commercial off-the-shelf products. So understanding that cyber liability from a third-party risk perspective even putting the right tool sets to audits. As much as we say we put it in the contract that we audit, we don't audit. We don't have time to audit all the third parties. And then in addition to that cyber liability theme, maybe something along the lines of understanding the cyber insurance, right? Tougher and tougher to negotiate insurance. It's tougher and tougher to put in the right requirements to make sure who's liable when in case something does happen. So I would say something along the lines of cyber liability. I think that's going to be a key theme as decision makers are looking to renew or renegotiate the current insurance policies while tackling the third-party risk that we all face.
David, I think that's a great ad, and I know the team behind Cyber Bracketology just took that one down. Here at Secureworks, we work with a lot of cyber insurers, a lot of law firms, and also help with our own customers, really trying to understand what's the balance when you think about risk. And I think that the risk conversation is going to be one of the top conversations that C-level executive boardrooms are having. How do you really measure cyber risk relevant to the entire risk profile of an organization? And I think understanding that and then understanding the insurance and the response plan that you have to back it up is perfect. Well, again, David, Scott, Dr. AK, thank you so much for not only joining today, but really the time and effort you put behind your top 4 picks. It's clear that you didn't just go and pick and come up with what you have. You really put some thought behind it. You thought about those that you speak in the industry and where we sit really as a community on the things of where organizations should think about investing or can double down in their areas. For all those that joined today, thank you. If you're interested in doing your own bracketology pick, we'll put the link here on the LinkedIn Live, but you can also go to secureworks.com. For those that don't know Secureworks, we do offer solutions that allow organizations to see more, detect better, and respond faster, leveraging our solutions of an open platform that really help organizations do a lot of what we discussed today, as well as a number of proactive services. So we do have the threat hunting and the penetration testing and the incident response team. And if you do find yourself in an incident, we have a full incident response team that anyone can access and help. Again, I really appreciate everyone's time today. Enjoyed speaking with you, and I look forward to doing this again next year. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.